I can tell you a story about an abandoned party where strange and frightening events took place. In one small town there was a legend about an abandoned party that took place in an old mansion. It was said that people disappeared at this party and never came back. Many thought it was just a rumor, but still there were those who decided to check this story for themselves. One day a group of friends decided to go to this abandoned party to have fun and find out how true this story is. They took flashlights and cameras with them and decided to spend a few hours in a mysterious mansion. Arriving at the site, they found that the building looked gloomy and abandoned. Inside, everything was flooded with darkness, and the air was filled with the smell of mold and rot. Despite this, they decided to continue the research. As they moved through the mansion, they heard strange sounds, footsteps, groans and whispers. Every time they tried to find the source of these sounds, they found themselves in empty rooms. Time passed, and friends began to realize that something was wrong. They began to get lost from each other, and each of them felt an overwhelming sense of anxiety and threat. Each of the friends began to encounter paranormal phenomena. One of them felt as if he was being watched by invisible eyes, another felt cold touches on his skin, and the third had terrible nightmares that seemed so real that he could not distinguish them from the surrounding reality. From time to time, they found traces of the presence of other people in the abandoned mansion, shoe marks left, fresh fire marks on the floor, even an unfinished glass of drink. All this scared them even more and kept them feeling that they were not alone. After several hours of wandering through the confusing corridors and halls, the friends decided it was time to leave. But they found that the exit they had entered through had disappeared. Doors and windows that were previously open have become locked and impenetrable. They panicked, knocked on doors, beat on windows, but no one responded. Suddenly one of the friends disappeared right before the eyes of the others. They heard his last scream, which was shrill and full of terror. They rushed to look for him, but he seemed to disappear into thin air. The remaining friends were intimidated and desperately tried to find a way out of this creepy maze. The remaining friends understood that they needed to join forces and find a way out of this nightmare. They were trying to follow the sounds to find a friend or at least understand what was going on. But the darkness and mystical forces of the place around them made it impossible. Finally, only one of the friends remained. He was exhausted and scared, but his will and desire to survive kept him on his feet. He kept looking for a way out, examining every room, every corner, but the abandoned mansion seemed like an endless maze. Suddenly, he heard a low whisper. The words spoken by unknown voices carried a warning: leave this place before it's too late. He stopped and felt a blood-curdling horror. These voices were unearthly and caused terrible horror. But instead of running, he decided to find the truth. He resolutely continued his research, trying to understand what was really going on. Soon he managed to discover a hidden door that led to the basement of the mansion. His heart was beating in his chest, but his curiosity was stronger. He went down in pitch darkness and found that the basement was filled with blood. The walls were covered with messages written in wall paint, full of madness and despair. The remaining friend examined the walls covered with creepy messages, and felt fear penetrate into his deepest being. The letters were written in blood, and the words seemed inhuman. They recreated evil and gloomy images and warned of imminent death. Among all the messages, he noticed something familiar. One of them listed the name of his missing friend. Fear gripped him completely, and he realized that this place has some connection with the disappearance of his friends. Deciding that he was on the trail of the cause of what was happening, he decided to continue his investigation. Further exploration of the basement turned out to be even more terrible. In the dark corners, he noticed a figure stained with blood, with distorted faces and entwined limbs. The air was permeated with the smell of rot, and incomprehensible noises made his heart stop. Suddenly, he heard faint sounds coming from the depths of the darkness. It was a quiet cry. He followed the sounds and found a small cage where his missing friend was imprisoned. He was pale, and his eyes reflected the anguish and horror he had experienced. After freeing a friend, They tried to escape from this cursed place. But their attempts were in vain. The exit remained unattainable, as if the abandoned mansion was playing with them, enclosing them in its merciless embrace. In the end, they ended up in a room full of mirrors. Each reflection displayed their distorted and frightened faces, creating the illusion of infinity. They realized that the abandoned mansion feeds on their fear, trying to keep them inside forever. As they continued their struggle for survival, they realized